Hi, welcome back to my channel, Our Blissful Chaos. I'm Omega, and today I'm going to just go right on into part 2 of my journey through homeschooling. So last week I left off with us moving into our RV, so that's just where I'm going to pick it up. So the year was 2014, and it was right before Fiona's birthday, and we moved ourselves into a 28-foot RV, and I will have some pictures coming up here. This is what our home looked like. It was pretty small. The schooling situation was actually pretty nice. The RV had some great storage, and I really learned at that point what curriculum and what books were essential to teaching the kids. So I really streamlined what I had, because I've said before I was a curriculum junkie and I had it all, you guys. So being in such a small space really made me hone in on what was our essentials, what was important, and what worked best for my kids. Shortly after moving into the RV, we ended up moving to the Bay Area, and that was a huge move for us. We had some challenges along the way, but we kept up with schooling and everything worked out. We did a lot of field trips. It was a good change for us with all the green and all the trees. We really loved being outdoors. So a lot of that year of 2014, 2015, we spent a lot of it outside. When we did get back into routine, most of the learning was history related. I used Mystery of History, and I supplemented with the products from Homeschool in the Woods. I will link those down below. And they worked really well together. My kids enjoyed doing them. There's lots of crafts, lap books, hands-on things that they liked at that age. And so that's what we did. And I didn't do math because, you know, Connor pretty much had figured out math pretty early on, so I didn't bother with it. Reading was still a struggle. He wasn't reading well. I would say probably like at a first grade level. I don't really know what the levels are, but like a Magic Treehouse book. He was struggling to get through that. And, you know, I was deep in research trying to find the right curriculum. I ended up creating something of my own that got him to a point where he wasn't struggling really to read. Like, he could read, but there wasn't a whole lot of joy. It was super basic, you know, just to be able to send him into the store and be like, hey, go look for this brand or look for this brand. He could figure it out. But his reading definitely wasn't at age level. He was 8, 9 at this time. And then one day, the catalyst moment for me was I, woke up and I'm in our little living room, kitchen area, and he hadn't come out of his little bunk. And I went up and he was in there crying, and I was like, dude, what's up? And he said, I don't want to get out of bed because as soon as I do, I know we're going to have to do learning. And he was crushed. And that moment was such a pivotal moment for me as a homeschool mom, because I saw that as much that as I wanted him to love learning and I wanted him to enjoy everything we were doing, clearly it wasn't working. I had moved from, my last video, I was super strict, classical method, and I had moved to a more relaxed approach, but it still wasn't enough. I realized that in those early years, I'd killed his love of learning, and I was just dragging him along. So I went on the internet and researched love of learning, inspiring, building, a love for education, a love for learning. And I came across Thomas Jefferson Education, which is now called Leadership Education. And there's a little video, I'll put a link down below, that resonated so well with me, and I got onto the Facebook group and I told these ladies, I just laid it out. I said, my kid hates learning and we've been doing this from the very beginning. He's now 9 and we're having such a struggle. We're having so many problems. And those ladies were fantastic. They, you know, walked me through the process of like a detox and deschooling. And initially I was like, yes, that sounds perfect. Just what I need to, you know, work on my education so that I can help him with his education, and just letting him be a kid, because we are year-round homeschoolers, and I had pushed for so many years. And this idea, although scary, was like, this is what we need. And so I went to Gavin and we discussed it all. He leaves it to me to make the decisions, but he's still my person that I run everything by. And you know, he's pretty involved in our homeschooling and giving me some stability and encouragement when I need it. So I explained it to him. I explained the whole idea of detox. I told him, you know, the problems with Connor, and he recognized those problems as well. And he's like, okay, let's go for it. He's like, but I want to reevaluate in 6 months. So I was like, oh, okay, well, we'll give him 6 months. And this was in November of 2015, and it's a time where we usually take that time off. We always usually take the winter months off. And so I'm like, okay, well, starting January 2016, he will have that whole year off of no required academics. So I went to Connor and I talked to him, and I told him basically the research that I'd found and the idea of a detox and deschooling, and he was on board. He was hesitant to believe it. We agreed that I would still do read aloud because that was like the only thing he loved. He's loved being read to since, you know, he was an infant. So I'm like, okay, well, we'll just continue with that. I wanted to keep that up for the younger 3 anyway. And around that time, Oren was dabbling with the idea of wanting to learn to read. So it's like, I'll just focus on Oren. So we had the holiday months, and then come January, I started focusing more on Oren and getting him acquainted with the alphabet and letter sounds and things like that, and left Connor on his own. We would go to the library probably 3 to 4 times a week. It was just down the street from us, so it was, you know, we'd walk there sometimes, but my kids loved the library. So we would go, I would pick out a big old stack of books for Connor. I'm like, hey, try reading these. These are great stories. And he didn't even pick them up. It never happened. And I would be like, oh man, if he would just find the right book, he would learn to read and he would love it. So we kept that up for about 5 months, going to the library, picking out reading books that he never touched. Also during this time, I'm working with Oren, and Gavin and I are noticing some tendencies with him that he's just not picking up the sounds, or he had like an auditory processing issue where I would say a sound and he would say it back and it was totally not what I said. So I went on a whole research kick for the month of January, and I came across Bright Solutions. I went through a couple of the seminars, her videos with Susan Barton, and I was like, oh my goodness, I think maybe Oren might be dyslexic. And the more I researched this and got into it, I realized, oh my goodness, I think Connor is dyslexic. And we went ahead and got the Barton program, and I was going through it, you know, training myself how to use it so that when the time came I could use it on Oren and Connor. Going through Susan Barton's site, she had a section where maybe your kid's not ready for Barton level 1, and she had a suggestion of what to use, and we ended up getting Foundations in Sound and ordered that. And I spent January, February, I think, learning how to teach that program, and I got really fluent in it so that I wouldn't have to use the book. I wanted it to be as organic as possible. And so, you know, I just drilled this information, the Barton and the Foundation in Sound, and would work with Oren like 10 to 15 minutes. Oren actually loved it. He is a board game type kid. He loves card games. He loves dice games, anything like that. And the approach with Foundations in Sound was a card game. And we worked through that for the remainder of the year of 2016. And by the end of the year, I realized he wasn't dyslexic. He just, you know, he had a phonemic awareness issue. Once that was sorted out, he was fine. We went ahead and did Barton 1 and 2 in the following years just to make sure he had a good foundation. But I also realized he wasn't ready. He didn't actually want to learn to read. So we got him past his phonemic awareness issue, and then he was done for like a year. He didn't pick up wanting to read again. So that was how it worked for Oren, Liam, and Fiona. They just played. They were so young. Back to Connor. It is about March, so he's had from like November through March off, and I was feeling the pressure, and I was online with these ladies on the Facebook group, like, nothing's happening. I'm taking him to the library, I'm strewing, and he's doing nothing. He's playing outside all day or playing with Legos. Like, it's not working. And I was starting to panic because Gavin had said in 6 months we were going to reevaluate and change it up if we need to. We're still going to the library. I'm still picking out stacks of books for him to read, and nothing from him. So we end up going one day and he picks up Big Nate. And to me, that was like, really? Big Nate? It looks ridiculous. But I was like, you know what? Okay, it's a book you picked. Let's get it. And, you know, it was maybe 11 in the morning when we went, and by 3 o'clock he's like, can we go back and get the next book? And I was floored. I was like, you finished the book already? And he's like, yeah, it was pretty good. So I was like, okay. And we drove to the library and we got like the next 3 books, and he finished them that week. So it's like, okay. So we went, I can't even remember how many books were in the series, but we ended up going through that series. Then he found Diary of the Wimpy Kid. He found Jack Stallwork, I think it is. And I will leave links to all these down in the description. But he went through these whole little series of books like Dragon's Breath, the origami Star Wars ones, and I was like, it's happening. I got on the Facebook group and I was like, yay, it's working, he's reading. And I continue to leave him alone. We continue to read aloud. And during this year, we got so many read alouds in, you guys, because I would read all day. Because that's all there was to do. It rained quite a bit, which was new for us. So we were, you know, in the RV. We got out when we could. I'd even go, we lived kind of like on a marsh area, and we'd go out to the marsh, and we had a little space out there where I would read to the kids while they tried to skip rocks. Reading was, you know, the only thing we really did. And eventually Connor found Percy Jackson. I'd been pushing Percy Jackson on this kid for, I don't know, the past 3 years. And finally he read it, and that was his author, that was his book. And from that moment on, after reading Percy Jackson, he became a reader. He carried a book with him everywhere he went, and he hasn't really stopped reading. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see we have our own little like Mom and Connor book club where we both, you know, go through and read a crazy amount of books together. And I cannot even begin to explain how wonderful it felt for him to finally be a reader. And once that moment hit for him, it was probably late in the year of 2016, towards the end of his detox, that he finally fell in love with reading. Prior to that, he was like, I'm going to be a streamer, and I will do a video about that process of letting him try to become a streamer. But him reading was so phenomenal for me. That was the moment where I'm like, okay, this works, and it affirmed to me that letting your children be in charge of their own education works, because they take responsibility, and as long as you're there to guide and mentor them and not so much push them and force it upon them, then they like make it their own. And it's hard to do it in the moment. Like, I was terrified that whole year because, you know, he turned 10 that year, and I was like, my goodness, I have a 10-year-old. I should be doing more. I should be, you know, tackling other subjects. We should be past this already. And going through leadership education and talking with these women was a lifesaver for me, because I was struggling. I was feeling like we're not doing enough. I'm not doing this right. So that year off for us, I did a lot of reading. I did a lot of teaching myself how to teach. I read Little Men, which is, you guys, my favorite homeschool book. It's not about homeschooling, but the environment and the way they do things is what I wanted for my homeschool. It's what I envisioned and pictured it being like. And so reading that book really taught me how to be a homeschooler. I highly recommend it. If you haven't read it, go get a copy and read it. It is fantastic. So as scary as it was to do this detox for, you know, a year, little over a year actually, it's what we needed. And I am so thankful that we did it, because from that moment on, Connor's approach to education and learning shifted and changed. And more importantly, my approach to it shifted and changed. And that laid the foundation for my younger three and how they've come up in learning and how I do things with them. I became a completely different homeschooler, and I think it's made a huge difference in my younger three. Well, that pretty much sums up the majority of the time and our learning that happened while we were living in the RV. I'm going to wrap it up for this part. Next week, I'm going to be doing the final part of our journey from moving out of the RV, coming back down to Southern California, me getting a full-time job, and homeschooling while I worked, as well as later joining a charter, leaving the charter, dealing with the coronavirus, and all that stuff. So stay tuned for that last part of our journey coming next week. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next week.